When a layman gets up to the mic, everybody looks. Wait, he doesn't have a collar on. And he introduces himself. He's just a layman. But he starts speaking, and everybody listens. Now, the pastors are a dime a dozen, but a layman that can speak at the microphone and knows something about either A, the issue at hand, or its possible implications, they're influential. So don't discount that. That's part of the strength of the Missouri Synod. And without a doubt, in my mind, the layman is what saved the Missouri Synod from going the way of the ELCA.
Welcome to Synod Stories, a show about the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, its past, present, and future. The LCMS National Convention is exactly 1 month away, and with it will come the mention of a lot of boards and commissions. One of the big ones is the CTCR, or Commission on Theology and Church Relations. To help me better understand what this entity does and how it works, I have Dr. Martin Noland, who is pastor of Grace Lutheran Church in San Mateo, California, and former director of the Concordia Historical Institute. Dr. Noland, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on the show today.
So I first want to just give full disclosure that Dr. Noland is on the slate for the ordained position of the CTCR. Dr. Noland has publicly stated that while he is honored to have been nominated, he would happily see one of the other men elected. Is that
exactly?
All right.
So those two, I should mention myself, so it's not just like you're being paid to say this. Pastor Mark Serberg, who is in Southern Illinois, is one of the candidates. I know him personally, and he's a top-notch pastor, and he knows his stuff. And the other is, guy I don't know, but Andrew Kennel of Monette, Missouri. I think I got those two pronunciations right. It's hard to tell. But one of my best friends from South Chicago says, oh, that was one of my classmates, and he's top too. So I'm encouraging delegates to vote for one of them, frankly. I think we need younger blood in a lot of these offices, and the boards especially. I've had plenty of experience over the years, and I'm not saying I don't want to do it, but I think both of these guys are competent, and I encourage delegates to vote for either one of them.
All right. Thank you very much.
Now before you go on to any question, you're up for something, aren't you? A delegate, not just as a delegate, but a board position, right?
I am on the slate for the Board of Regents for Concordia University, Irvine, as a lay lay regent.
Okay, so I looked up your. Well, you helped me a little bit too. I looked up your background. You know, what do you have to contribute? So, in terms of your business, what do you do as a vocation? You're a principal software engineer, which means that's higher up. You have guys under you, right?
Yep.
Like a manager at a place called
ServiceNow.
Do you even call it a place if it's distributed around the world?
Yeah, that is true. We do have a headquarters that I go to sometimes.
And where is that located?
In Santa Clara.
Oh, okay. And you live nearby in San Jose.
Yeah.
And we have to explain these things to the delegates, because I found out when I went to school in the Midwest that they think San Jose is in Los Angeles and Santa Clara is in San Diego. And then they find it's 500 miles apart. When they were planning to be just, their vacation got really fouled up. I said, check the map on these things, please. But anyway, okay. So you said that ServiceNow is big into customer service and IT management, so that information technology. You've been in the business for 30 plus years.
I have.
Wow.
I graduated in '92 when the military pullback was happening. So
right.
we used to get a lot of our people used to go out to Lockheed or to Martin Marietta back then, all the big defense contractors. I actually worked for, or had an offer to EDS, which was in Texas, a big defense contractor. And then I got my offer rescinded because they, all the government contracts dried up. And so everyone was pulling back. So yeah.
Yeah, I grew up here in the Silicon Valley, and back in those days in the 60s, our congregation in Cupertino, which Lutheran Church of Our Savior, most of the men, it was really, I always thought that everybody worked for Lockheed, but I found it was just our church. That was considered the Lockheed Lutheran Church or something like that. And I also learned that this was Lockheed Missiles in Space, which is in Sunnyvale. And a lot of those men were in classified work. So what they told me is, I would say, well, Mr. Schmidt, who do you work for? I work for Lockheed. But what do you do? I'm an aeronautical engineer. What do you actually make? And then he'd say, you look at his friends, they'd all start smiling. If I tell you, I have to shoot you. And I go, oh. But a lot of the guys did that. In Silicon Valley, it's not just commercial. There is a lot of military contracts, too. So I understand a lot. Not that I could do your job, but I understand from a business standpoint. And it's very, what can I say, ephemeral. Because my dad worked for IBM, so the nice thing about IBM, and it has a few military contracts, this is years ago, most of it was commercial, and that's a steady income stream, regular customers. But the military, if you got that, it all depends on Congress. If it flips from Republican to Democrat, then they'll just cancel all the contracts and everybody's out of work. It's just the way the business works in Silicon Valley. So anyway, you've been in it for 30 years, so you stuck it out.
Yep.
That's a big thing in my mind. What else? I have some other things about you. You're an interesting guy, really. You said you work for Adobe. Anybody that's worked with a PDF, Adobe, they developed that standard, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they have a downtown.
They're downtown San Jose.
Downtown San Jose.
Yeah, they used to be in Mountain View. When I started, they were in Mountain View, and the guys who developed the PDF format and the printer formats and stuff like that, I worked for them. That was one early in my career, so like '94. So those guys, the founders, were still around.
So did you have to code for drivers, printer drivers and stuff?
No, I did that. I luckily didn't have to do that. That's
like the grunt work. Thank God for AI, because now we can give that grunt work to the robots, right? Yeah, I tried doing some driver. Oh, it was horrible. And then Sun Microsystems. You worked for them for a while. Yep. That's also in Sunnyvale, Santa Clara.
Well, they're defunct now, but out in they were out in East Palo Alto. San Quentin was that's what we called it when it was like right by the marshes, and no one went for walks in the afternoon because you would smell the bay out there.
So here's another story about Sun Microsystems. I took a friend. He wanted to be posed by the Facebook sign that's down there on 237, which is, what is that? Is that in Sunnyvale or San Jose? It's close anyway.
Edge of San Jose, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so I posed him in front of the sign, and I looked at that, and I said, that sign looks familiar. Because, I used to work here during the summer. And so I walked behind the sign, and it said, Sun Microsystems. Whoa. Is that the location where it used to be? Where Facebook
there were offices there, yeah. Yeah, we had offices up there. It used to be big. It was all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really before PCs took off, or the internet anyway. Because that was really the only effective way to do networking across the country, right?
Yep.
So you had that experience. Let's see. You got your bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which West Coast people wouldn't know. That's Troy, New York, Hudson River. It's a highly rated. It's not all computers. It's engineering of all sorts.
But it is all engineering. Yeah, it's engineering and science. It's an institute. So I took 6 humanities courses my whole time there. There was general ed was fluid mechanics.
Right. Yeah, I remember fluid mechanics. That was no fun. I had my Bible study teacher, and he worked for Westinghouse, and his specialty was fluid mechanics, and they helped design the Trident missile, which was designed to shoot the missile under the water, and it would go all the way up and then take off once it came to the surface. And I asked him to explain fluid mechanics, and I was pretty good in math, and only 1 minute into it, I said, stop. I don't know where you're going with. Anyway, there's a bunch of weird calculus and everything else. So, yeah. So now you say your day-to-day work is helping to lead the organization in its transformation into AI-first software development. Now, what does that mean?
So, right, the typical person's right, previous to this big change, would sit at their computer and type away and say, if I get this input, then give me this output. So that's like just basic programs thing.
Right.
But now it's like, well, the way that they want us to do that particular action, getting input and taking to output, they want you to do like 5 of those in the same amount of time that you used to do one. And you do that by telling the AI, I want to do this, and that, so given this input, give me, and I want to get this output. So you go write the program for me, and you have like multiple of those things running at the same time.
Oh,
and
wow.
And so you're managing. You become, even the individual contributor becomes a manager of these AI agents, as they're called. So yeah, and then so people don't know how to use them, don't know which one to use. How how do I know if I'm getting good output? Like how do I validate and verify? And so there's all this, there's just a lot of unknowns going on right now. And my my job is to like help people through this stuff and understand how our engineering leadership wants us to work with this stuff and guide the more junior engineers and teams on how do they stay within the bounds of what the corporation wants to do. So yeah, that's I do a lot of, I don't write a lot of day-to-day production stuff that goes out. I just help guide where things need to go to do best practices and what our company needs. So
Well, I haven't told this story to you before, not even offline, but my dad worked for IBM, and he came out of San Francisco State University. He originally wasn't electrical engineering, and then he saw, this is 1955. Electronic engineering is the future. So that's what he got into. And then he started working at IBM, and he had the latest, because he worked for the Navy, so he had the latest technology in the Navy. He was right on the cutting edge. And then he kind of got into management in the early 60s, and IBM found that the graduates of the colleges in California, which were supposed to be advanced, they didn't know anything about computer science or even electronics. So what are you going to do? The problem was the faculty who had tenure, they were back in the pre-electronic era. So what do you do? So what Dad and some of his guys did, and this was in cooperation with headquarters, is that they had summer classes that were designed for the tenured faculty who had gotten their degrees 40 years ago, so that they could be introducing students to basic transistor technology, because transistors were they were out in the 50s, but they're really starting to be used a lot in the early 60s, and also computer science. And then once the guys that were at the college, the tenured faculty, they knew it, then they could explain it to the students. Now, why I bring this up is because I think you're well positioned, very well positioned, better than anybody I know, to serve on the Board of Regents at Concordia Irvine. It's a West Coast school. People expect it to be, on the top of our Concordias in terms of computer science. But the question is, are the faculty on the top of computer science? And they need somebody like you that's right in the middle of what's going on and developing to check those things out. And, faculty, once they get tenure, they don't like learning new things. Did I say that? But it's the truth. And so getting somebody like you, not just anybody, but you've had experience in serving on Board of Regents before, and then with your knowledge of where things are, because AI right now is in flux, that you be able to help the faculty that are in, maybe the staff too, do they have what they need? I think you're better positioned than just about any Missouri Synod guy I know to serve on that faculty. So I just made an argument for your being, I hope you get elected anyway. And if you don't get elected, let me know, and we'll try to find a way to get you down there to Irvine, because they need your help.
Well, my daughter is down there, so I go there a lot. So really? I'll just break in.
Is she a student now?
She's a first year. She just finished her first year at CUI. She's a kinesiology major. She's actually still down there. The class let out a month ago, but she's down there doing an internship with one of the professors and doing data collection on a Parkinson's study. So she's helping out there, and she's loving it. She goes, she like, so I'll say this. There is a, I saw one of the resolutions was to like, that the Concordias in chapel should use hymnals, the LSB. And she was like, please let them do that. Cause she has never gone to a chapel because she just is in fear of it. She goes to evening prayer on Tuesday night. There's a bunch of them that like the pre-sem students and a bunch of them. She goes to church every Sunday at Dr. Espinosa's church. She's a faithful Lutheran, but she just avoids chapel because she does not know what she's going to get there. But I have a deal with her. I'm going to have her on, and she's going to go there for a week to chapel for a week, because I know different days have different service styles and stuff like that. So she's going to go there for a week, and then we're going to talk about it. And so I've convinced her to like at least explore and see, give me a report on what's going on, especially if I'm a regent. That would be fun.
That would be good. Have you met Dr. Espinosa yet?
Oh yeah, I know him very. Yeah, we've been to that chapel church a bunch of times, and Pastor Weller always. I mean, he was Pastor Weller. My pastor knows Dr. Espinosa, and so he was the one that guided us to that congregation.
Is that Laguna Beach or Irvine? I don't remember.
It's in Irvine now. They are in Irvine now. They have a space at the nursing campus. So CUI that's one of the weird things that the whole CUS and the deed for that property. Right. They're having all kinds of issues with it, but they rent or they have a space in that facility, and that's where they hold church. Yeah.
Yeah, I have other friends that attend that church. So yeah, that's good. Great. Mm-hmm. So just a warning about kinesiology. Your daughter, when you get old, is going to be nagging you to get your proper exercise. Just be aware. Yes. My oldest daughter took kinesiology, and now she's an RN, and she doesn't nag me, but I'm waiting for it to happen pretty soon. Right?
Yes. She already had me do. She had the whole family doing these circle taps, and then like Dad couldn't do it, and she's like, "What are you doing, Dad? Everyone else can do it." I'm like, I might think my brain is wired wrong.
So my oldest daughter has tested me out. Can I, with straight knees, can I reach my toes? Flexibility, it's a big thing. If you're not flexible, you're not going to get the exercise. So just be aware, your daughter's going to do that. It's going to be good for you, though, Brian.
Yes. So thank you very much for that endorsement, Dr. Noland.
Yeah. You're not paying me for this. I sincerely believe it, and I've encouraged you to serve in other places before, and you've done well. So,
thank you. So now, getting that out of the way, what is the CTCR? I have a general vague, like they have reports and they get together and but what is it, and how did it come about?
Yeah. So the Synod has always had, well, maybe not in its first decade or so, but that the Synod's been around since 1847. Once they got going, they realized that there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the Synod in convention, but it doesn't have the time. Here's just an example. So the convention workbook this year is this thick, and this is double, front and back, and I don't know if you downloaded it. I tried to read through it. It has 521 pages. And it's in small print, and some of it is super small print. Some guy here, look at this. It's crazy. That was very interesting. It's really small. But I mean, there's the things that we have to figure out, that we have to deal with, the congregations have to know. So years ago, they started forming, I forgot what they call it. It was all in German originally, but now it's kind of like a board. People are familiar with this. There's a board, or let's say your congregation voters assembly, and there's a task that needs to be done. What you do is you form a committee. So the word commission actually comes from the word committee, or vice versa. So basically, the commissions that the Synod has are standing committees. That means they're not just for a one-task deal. So because of that, if we have a short-term committee, we call them task forces. But we have several commissions, and not just the CTCR. I'll explain a little bit about that one in detail. This, by the way, is the current Handbook of Synod. and it has our Constitution, which is very close to the original that we had in 1847. It hasn't changed much. The bylaws have changed enormously. Now, the commissions that we have, and where are they? There's a number of boards. We reduced the number of boards back in 2010. We have about 5 agencies that are like separate corporations, plus the trust entity of the Concordia plans. Oh, here's the commissions. Commission on Constitutional Matters. So their job is they kind of rule with this book, with the Constitution and bylaws. Commission on Doctrinal Review, which means anything published by the Synod, by Concordia Publishing House, or the periodicals, is passed by a pastor who has some time to read and make sure there's nothing of false doctrine. There's Commission on Handbook, and all they do is this thing. And finally, Commission on Theology and Church Relations. So that has 2 different sides. So that's the name of it. We just call it CTCR for short, because otherwise there's too many syllables. Germans like lots of syllables. They have words that are like 60 syllables, and they actually mean something. They're not making fun. Anyway, we just call it CTCR for short, and I hope you remember that, because otherwise you say, what is he talking about? Okay, I did make a summary. Where did I put that? I'll be right with you. So here is basically what the CTCR does. On the one hand, it helps congregations and pastors in the matter of doctrinal unity. Now, people say, oh, I don't like doctrine, But the whole purpose of doctrine is to keep the church together on the same ground, the foundation, which is the Word of God, the Holy Scriptures. And we all know Holy Scriptures are written in Hebrew and Greek. So when you go from there to English, it's easy to make doctrinal mistakes. So Lutherans have a book that helps us keep together. That's called the Book of Concord. And that's our standard textbook, you might say, on doctrine. But things come up and have come up since the Book of Concord was published in 1580. And so how do you resolve those problems? We don't rewrite the Book of Concord. We don't claim that the Book of Concord is even Scripture. But so how do we handle those things? So the first and the main job is that congregations and pastors are together. They don't get into squabbles, and it helps resolve doctrinal issues or problems. The second thing is that the CTCR helps the Synod President, because he is the head of the Synod, and the head deals with other heads of other church bodies. So in the United States, we have a fairly close relationship with the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod, and it has more congregations than just Wisconsin, and the Evangelical Lutheran Synod, which is mostly a Norwegian ethnic group, but they're beyond that today, just like we are. And those 2 churches used to be in fellowship with us. And then they broke because we kind of lost our bearings about where we were going and what we stood for. And then back in the 70s, we got back on track. So what happens several times a year, the president of the Missouri Synod talks to the president of the WELS, W-E-L-S or ELS, and they talk about things. And as they talk about things, both of them take notes. And they realize there's a problem. Then they say, well, it's not good that I myself make all these decisions. So what in the Missouri Synod the president does is he passes this doctrinal problem that is caused by the relationship between the Wisconsin and the Missouri Synod, and they pass it to the CTCR and say, okay, guys, I want you to work on this, get back to me, and tell me what's the history, what's the doctrine, the Scripture. And a lot of this, none of us ever see anything except for the president and his staff, and then the other church body. Now we are in fellowship of some sort, I think with like 45, it's in the 40s, 40 Lutheran churches around all the world. So you think about that. That's enough for one, with a little bit of vacation. The president of the synod is dealing with one church body every week of the year, and then it starts all over. That's a lot of work. So he really needs somebody to help him out. And what the synod is decided years ago, instead of having the president appoint these people himself, and he appoints a few, is that the other parts of the synod that have, they're vested in this interest of doctrine. So the seminary faculties in particular, because they're generally our best theologians. So be St. Louis and Fort Wayne, they elect or appoint some people. The Council of Presidents, they are the guys that are in the districts, and they supervise what's going on there. And then some other agencies or groups, they all have somebody that they have appointed, including the Synod Convention, to this commission to help out congregations and pastors with doctrine, and then the Synod President. Now, what do they actually produce? So now I know that based on what you told me, that ServiceNow, does it produce software or does it produce services?
It produces, it does both. Yeah, it does do both.
Okay, so you have to ask then, well, what does the CTCR produce? Is it a product or a service? Well, kind of both. When it deals with the president, it's actually serving him. He says, I need this, and I need it now, like within a week. And so they give it to somebody on the commission, or maybe at one of the seminaries, and say, we need this right away because this meeting's coming up. So that's more like a service. But they also produce products, and the products that they make are basically texts, booklets. Now they're online documents. And I can show you some of their products right here. I've got my collection of CTCR documents from about here over to here, plus a few in this area. You can see they're in a, what is it, a 6.5 by 8.5, 6.5 by 8.5 size. You can also get them on the Synod's website. So you go to, I think it's Leadership, and then drop down the tab to Commission on Theology and Church Relations. They bring up their web page, and then toward the bottom of it, they have all the documents, and they're organized by topics. So if you know something and you don't know what the topic relates to, you can just go in the search and type whatever word you want, and it'll take you whatever applies to that. So like, say, close communion or communion practice, it would take you right to those that are there. That's really very, very, very handy. I mean, you can even get it on your cell phone. Thanks to people like Brian Yamabe with ServiceNow, we can do lots of things. So some of it is, I think just about all of it is online. Most of them are also in print. And what you get in print, I think you order from CPH. Now, what else does it do? They refer issues and questions to competent persons, and I think I mentioned that. So if a question comes from a congregation and they're dealing with a new cult, religious cult, well, this happens in the Bay Area all the time, right? Jim Jones came from here. He was on Fillmore Street, I think, in San Francisco. So maybe back in the time before Jim Jones moved to Guyana, the San Francisco congregation said, who is this Jim Jones? And I'll get to that in a minute, but there's a part of the CTCR that just deals with new religious things, whatever they are. And so maybe they asked CTCR and they said, we don't know who Jim Jones is. You're going to have to help us. And then together they would work on this. They also produce studies or reports of current social issues. So maybe one current social issue is hasn't been totally resolved. What's ethical or not ethical is, what's it called? It's implantation of eggs in another...
In vitro fertilization?
Yeah, in vitro fertilization, or there's several technologies that way. So is it right to take eggs from a mother and give it to some other lady, and then she does the mothering, and then it goes back to the mom? And to me, it sounds like lots of problems with this. But, they're actually doing it now successfully. We'll find out if it affects the children, years down the line. But there's a current social issue, and I think maybe they've addressed, at least initially, provide institute seminars and other means for ongoing education. Well, they really don't need to do that because both of the seminaries do a lot of that. And I just, this last week, went to continuing education sponsored by Fort Wayne in Cupertino, and I sat right next to your pastor. And I kind of, every once in a while, I thought, I had to give him a little hard time. I'd go like this. I said, what do you want, Martin? I said, that one applies to you. He said, not to me. I said, yeah. Anyway, that's ongoing education. And then they produce studies or documents that are circulated in the synod by other people. So maybe your congregation decides that they would like to investigate the nature of apricot orchards. Do you have apricot orchards down there? They used to have them.
We used to, yeah.
Outwood Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have them. So, this is just hypothetical. Of course, they wouldn't do that. And then they come up with a theological study, and they say apricots are a tool of the devil, so nobody can eat it. Well, now the apricot farmers, they are up in arms, and they say, what's going on? And they complain to the CTCR. CTCR gets a copy of your document, and they look at it, or they give it to somebody that knows theology, and they say, this is not right. There's nothing wrong with apricots. So they do that type of thing. They don't do a lot of that work, but it's there if you need it. And then I think, this is a new thing, is that they give official opinions, so-called opinions, that must be followed in dispute and expulsion cases. So if the reason that a congregation or a church worker is going to be expelled is a doctrinal issue, either party to the case, the plaintiff or the defendant, through it's actually part of the dispute resolution process or the suspension process, they can call on the CTCR to make an opinion. But it's really a ruling, because if they state this, and usually I think they have to have a majority of the CTCR to make the ruling, then the court or the district president has to follow that. And that's a new thing only since 1992. And some of our Missouri Synod lawyers think there's a big problem with that, because it means the CTCR is actually making the judgment. And it should be the judges that are making the judgment with everything on both sides that they hear. But the way it works is they just hear the one question and then they rule on it. Lawyers talk about this as an ex parte ruling, which in law is forbidden in the United States. So that, I think, is a kind of a questionable thing that's in there, but it's not the fault of the CTCR. The convention adopted it back in '92, and I think it needs to be adjusted to reform. And the final thing is, the CTCR investigates and publishes reports on fraternal organizations. Now, what's a fraternal organization? Not the Sigma Phi fraternity that you are a member of. I'm just kidding. I don't know if, were you a member of a?
I was actually
not sorority, of course,
no,
a fraternity, right?
Yeah, I was a fraternity. Yeah, I was the president of my fraternity too. That's
okay.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, my wife was a member of sorority at CSU in Colorado, and I give her a hard time all about that. Her sorority sisters, in fact, I don't know if they really approve of me or not. So, but anyway, it's not that. It's not fraternities and sororities. Those are a whole different class of thing. We're talking about fraternal organizations like the Masons, which are like one of the original ones. The Roman Catholic Church had a deal with the Masons in France, I think, or England, or both. And see, when they showed up, it was after the Reformation, so they mainly had to deal with it in France and Spain. And they found out that the Masons were anti-Christian. They did not believe in the Trinity. They invented another god, and they had religious rituals. So the Catholic Church really turned on them, and they tried to get the Inquisition to suppress the Masons. And of course, you know, the Masons didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. That's a joke from Monty Python. But we are also uncomfortable with them. So we're concerned that our members, their promises and pledges that are made inside those groups, they tend to be secretive. So our theologians and also some of our sociologists, like, what's his name? Dr. Schmidt, I forgot his first name, Alvin Schmidt. He did a lot of work on that, and it's by Greenwood Publisher. It's kind of like a standard dictionary on fraternal organizations. And it was in the beginning of, it was the first congregational constitution and bylaws. It was at Trinity Lutheran Church in the Soulard district of St. Louis. And Walther helped in the creation of the Constitution and bylaws, that they put in a article that said no member of their church could be a member of the Masons or the Lodge. It was the first time. And after that, it became a standard thing in all the constitutions. Now, maybe not all constitutions have it. But anyway, that's why then somebody in the Synod since then has always been tasked with investigating these groups. And the fact is they change. So, for example, as Dr. Schmidt points out in his book, for most of their history in the United States, the fraternal organizations were against having people that weren't white in the organization. So they discriminated against blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Africans, and anybody that wasn't European blood. They were not welcome. And this all changed with the civil rights movement. So almost all of the fraternal organizations now do accept people from all different races and ethnicities. So the problem with that is that if you're looking at some literature on fraternal organizations and you want to know what they do and what their membership is, you really can't rely on anything before 1960, which means somebody's got to keep up to date on this stuff. And so it takes a special gift, an interest in that area. It's not one of my particular areas of interest, but it needs to be done because we don't want our members compromising their faith by joining some of these groups. So anyway, that I think covers, I looked through the bylaws to make sure I got everything. That pretty much covers what the CTCR does for the congregations and pastors and the president of the synod.
So there are a couple resolutions to for fellowship with church bodies in the convention. So the CTCR would have looked through, verified and make sure that because the resolutions are fairly short, but there's a lot behind it. So I'm assuming someone looked at that and made sure it's all copacetic and things like that.
Right. So that's a good question. And in fact, this is what I did here. At the present time, the floor committees have done their initial work for the convention, which is coming up in 4 weeks?
Yep.
3 weeks maybe.
18th.
And you can get this thing called Today's Business. Does this show in the picture? Or is it reversed? Okay. Today's Business, and it's not as big as the conventional workbook. What they do is they digest. So they get a lot of overtures that come in on one topic. Well, they'll just put them, if they're all aligned basically in the same way, they'll just put it into a single resolution. And and they have to deal with some of the theological issues. And the one you talked about This is Resolution 504 now in today's business. And you go online, you can download it, you can see it. And it's on page 99 of today's business number 1. And the Resolution 504 says, to address concerns with partner churches. These are, out of the 40, or here's the number. We have 43 Synod partner churches that we're in church fellowship with. Now, what are the type of issues? So the practice here is just a couple, it's a bullet list of about 7 items. The practice of fellowship between church bodies without agreement in the doctrine of the gospel and all its articles. So some church bodies that were in fellowship don't use the same principles of fellowship as we do, and that could be a problem. The next one, some of the church bodies have accepted the ordination of women. Recently, the Lutheran Church of Australia and the Lutheran Church of Japan did that. And so as a result, we broke fellowship with them. But there's others that are struggling with it. Advocacy of apostolic succession and the necessity of episcopal ordination. What that ends up doing, and that's one of the church bodies that we're in fellowship with, if you accept it, it undermines, first off, the entire Missouri Synod polity. There's no problem that we have, I think, in being in fellowship with other polities, but if you accept apostolic succession, that means that all their pastors have to be ordained either by the Church of Sweden, which is, well, you know about the Swedes. I'm partly Swede, so I can say this. So I think it's the Swedish Church and the Anglican Church and the Roman Catholic Church all claim apostolic succession. So if a church says in their doctrine you have to be apostolic succession, they're pretty much going to have to go to Rome to be ordained. And that means all the pastors that don't have that are no longer considered pastors and their sacraments don't work. That's the problem with that doctrine. I mean, that's why Lutherans have never accepted it. But there's one of the churches out there that we're in fellowship, I think we helped start them, that sounds like they're advocating it. Have they officially adopted it? I don't know. So what it does then is it gives the task of investigating this to the president of the Synod and the CTCR, and it commends them for having worked on this, and then it gives some direction. So that's one of the resolutions. And what they did there, the bullet points, I didn't read all of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 10 points of doctrine that we're seeing is they're not following the Book of Concord or the Bible. So they're sister churches. Now, do you have a sister?
I have a sister, yes.
I have an adult sister too, and you may have met her. And she, unlike my wife, who is very kind, my sister will always tell me when I'm wrong. So this is what sister churches do. We try to keep each other on the level because nobody else really wants to do it. And so there's one of the resolutions. And the CTCR is involved with that to make sure that whatever we say there is true, that they're actually advocating. Well, we don't name the church bodies in that resolution, which is, I think, a good thing. But we're saying if they pass this resolution as it is, then the president of the Synod and the CTCR is going to talk to those churches and say, our convention said we have to work on this, and we're not happy with it. So that's kind of some of the work the CTCR does, and you can see it right there in that resolution.
So when they do their reports, like I know there was a one on recently on administration of the Lord's Supper and things like that, right? How do they nominate? Is it like almost like the founding where like they nominate a couple guys to go off and write this, and then they review it as a body and pass it as a body, or how do those kind of, do you know how those kind of things get put together?
So you're talking about like close communion, because that's one of the things. So I'll take you to my little library here. Am I disappearing? No,
nope, you're okay.
So someplace here is couple of documents that we have, and you can get these online. So this is an old one, 1983. See, I don't think the CTCR has been around in its current form since, well, it's been about sometime in the 1950s, late 50s. So this says the theology and practice of the Lord's Supper. Pretty basic stuff, but it includes practice. So it does deal with the issue of close communion. And then this is a very detailed study, admission to the Lord's Supper. So close communion means that not everybody is going to be admitted, or that maybe wants to be. Basics of biblical and confessional teaching. So they really go into the Bible and in the confession and say, what does it say on the topic? And that was 1999. And then most recently, proper administration of the Lord's Supper, applying Scripture and confessions to contemporary issues. So there's more issues than just closed communion. And I don't remember, here it talks about substitution of grape juice for ordinary wine. Now, you know all the vintners and wine growers in Silicon Valley are going to be very unhappy if they start using grape juice. But the people in Concord, Massachusetts, they'll be very happy, right? So, yeah, I'm just kind of kidding on that. But, so, I mean, does the Bible say we have to use alcoholic wine? Or can we use grape juice? The Methodists, any of the what I call the teetotaler church bodies, they just use grape juice, and they think they're fine. But is that really correct? So this book deals with that issue, and you can get a copy online for free. Everything online is free. The use of prepackaged elements in the Lord's Supper. So during COVID, a lot of congregations bought, they're about this big. On the one side they had cheese, and the other side they had wait, that's not right. I think they used that packaging, though, and they had crackers on one side and wine on the other. So is that okay? Is it forbidden by Scripture or confessions? And the last one is substitution of non-wheat bread for wheat bread. So can you use other grains in the wafers? We do have, you can purchase gluten-free, and I guess that would still, gluten-free would still be wheat, right? So that's another question entirely. You can get gluten-free, but now maybe some people have allergies or stomach problems with wheat in general, a wheat allergy, and so can we use non-wheat? And that will answer that. I'm not going to tell you the answer because it's pretty complicated, but these are all CTCR documents. This was 2025. It's one of the latest, 1999 and 1983. And so you look at that and you say, well, about every 25 years, the same issues the same topics come up, but different issues, because this thing didn't cover all those things. It said closed communion, but it maybe didn't define it. And then this had to define it and defend it. And then this one has to deal with other things. That gives just an example of how the CTCR does its work, and it helps us remain faithful to the Bible and confessions.
So were there eras like when the CTCR was more active or had more consequential reports, like during Seminek's time frame? I don't know what we would have said about them, but like are there time frames when they have to do there are more issues that come up or anything along those lines?
Yeah, that's true. So it goes and before the CTCR there were other committees. I forgot their names. You can go into the history of the Missouri Synod and find that. There was one committee that all it dealt with was church fellowship issues. That's all it did. And then there was, but see, the Germans were used to having the theological side of this was what they called Gutachten or Gutachten. That's a German word, and I'm not sure what it means. It starts with the word gut, so it sounds like good advice, but it was a little more than that. So this goes back to the Reformation. See, the Reformation kind of changed the seat of authority, big time. not just kind of. What was the seat of authority for doctrine and the interpretation of Scripture in the Roman Catholic Church? Can you tell me?
The Pope.
The Pope, of course. And that was the way it was up until Luther came along, and then he threw some tomatoes at the Pope and said, no. He had some pretty strong words to say about it. He even called the Pope the Antichrist. It's in our confessions. Because the Pope elevated himself above the Scriptures. He said things and supported things that can't be found in Scripture and were contrary to Scripture. So who can do that? The Pope can. But then once the Lutherans, and well, also the Reformed churches, they had the same issue. They developed their own church body. Well, now who's going to help them figure out their theology? Well, so what the Lutherans did, initially anyway, was if they had a theological problem, let's say at a synod convention or a council, they would send it to the faculty at Wittenberg, because that was where their best theologians were. So, and the statement that the faculty would make was called a Gutachten. And over the years, these were collected in, what's it called? The Latin term is concilia, which is a version Latin for councils. Councils, but it's really more the word counsel, like advice. They used that word because they didn't want to put the University of Wittenberg above the Scriptures. You see? So they're giving counsel to the churches in that we have studied these things, all the various aspects of it that we can find, all the documents, and in our opinion, this is what should be done, or this is what the Scripture is saying here. So that was, and you can go to, I know that they have a copy of it at St. Louis and also at Concordia Historical Institute, because I consulted the Concilia a couple of times. Not that I'm great at Latin, but somebody'd asked, and the staff said, "Where's that book?" I said, "I know where it is." So we still actually, those of us that can read a little Latin, I can read German, no problem. We still go back to the Wittenberg Gutachten, which is just like, really, the CTCR. So Lutherans have always done that. What happened with the Missouri Synod, when we created because I don't remember what the previous, it was more like it was an office of the president. So the president of Synod had an appointed committee, and they would do the theological work, and usually he would call people from both seminaries. And then they realized, if the president of the Synod, I won't say, let's say John Schmidt, if he's always asking for opinions from St. Louis, Springfield's going to be unhappy. So they thought, well, if we have a standing committee, we should have equal representation of our two seminaries. And that's how they created the CTCR. So both seminaries have equal weight of the people they put on there, or that they elect. Usually it's always from their faculty. And that way, I think it's a fair thing. And they really have their top people that are on the CTCR. And people that get elected by the convention, like, I'm nominated, they more represent the actual practice of the pastor. And they're also laymen. So the CTCR members that are laymen, when after they've written something, they say, "George, we want you to read this. And what don't you understand?" And George reads it, and he comes back and says, "I don't understand any of it. What are you doing here?" "Okay, we'll give it to somebody else that can write in your language." And then they'll give it to Pastor, let's say, Pastor Serberg. And Pastor Serberg, who is one of the nominees, will look at it and say, "Well, I understand what you're saying, but this doesn't work in today's parish. It doesn't work at all. We're going to have total conflict." And the purpose is try to resolve conflicts, and that we're all happy that's unity, right? And so they really listened to Pastor Serberg because, we didn't think about the practical effects on the congregation. Well, guess what? That's a very big thing. So having a mixture of different vocations in the church, laymen, pastors, theological professors who are usually the experts on those things, people representing the district, because the district presidents, they deal with cases all the time, problems. I don't want to be a district president. All they deal with is problems all the time. Oh, gosh. But they know what the problems are. A typical parish pastor, if he gets along with his people, he may not have any problems at all. Besides the little things, but no major problems. The district presidents know where the big problems are. And so their appointee, it might be a district president or somebody that's worked with them, he'll say, oh, yeah, but I know a lot of cases where this is going to cause real trouble and it won't solve anything. So those are the type of voices that you have on the CTCR. And I think whoever put this together years ago, they really thought through how does this work with the theological statement without actually works in practice.
Makes sense. So the CTCR is advisory, right? They don't have any binding authority on. But so how do we know if they are effective and if they're doing a good job? Like how do we measure that, or how do we look at what they're doing and see, understanding if it's appropriate?
Not today.
Not today?
No, I'm on the radio.
Okay.
So you can close the door. Thank you.
Okay. It's raining, right?
Oh yeah, that was the cleaning staff. Yeah. So how do we know that they're doing their job? Well, it helps first off that they come from different groups. It's not like, and so there could be disagreements within the commission itself, but that's kind of a good thing because then one perspective doesn't dominate. Now we assume that everybody agrees with the inerrancy of Scripture and that the Book of Concord is our standard for theology and practice. And if you don't agree with that, you shouldn't really be on any convention or any commission or board of the Synod anyway. But, things slip through. But the fact that there's, about 11 or 12 members, and there's also faculty, and they've been vetted, thoroughly vetted. This thing called prior approval, have you heard complaints about that? Yeah, some people don't like the fact that you have to go through several groups or individuals to approve you before you can actually become a faculty member at a college or seminary. I think it's a good thing. Because if everybody agrees this guy's decent and he knows his stuff, well, then, it's not just one person making that decision or one group. I don't know if I really answered your question. So how do you know whether it's good or bad? Well, then it's up to, I get these I've been a pastor over 40 years now. I usually get them in the mail. And so I put it on my reading stack, and then we'll pick it up with a pen in hand. And here's some other ones. And you can see on the back of one of these, I made notes. In this particular one, I put who was on the CTCR. So I could ask on the inside, what's really going on with this thing? And then in the back, they put notes, spaced. And so as I read through it, I made notes. And then I did complain about this one. And that's how we keep, so what happens if there's enough complaints or the commission says, yeah, that guy's really right. Pastor Schmidt in Alaska, wherever he is, why didn't we think of that? And then they'll have to redo it, and come out with a second version. They don't do it very often because it's usually a pretty good process. But sometimes things get political, and that's where you get problems. Somebody's trying to please somebody or some group in the synod by what they say, and then it defeats the whole purpose, because the whole is to bring together doctrinal unity from Scripture and confessions, and if it doesn't do that, then it's got to be redone, basically. I don't know if that answers your question.
That makes a lot of sense. That was helpful. So how, and this is something that happened, how does this information get to the person in the pew? Because the practice of, or the proper administration, there's all the, there's 3 documents covering it, and there's still laity that do not know any of this, So how is it supposed to get there? What is, just trying to understand that.
No, so excellent questions. So what should be done is, well, there's several ways it can happen, and several ways that it can fail to happen. There should be, most Missouri Synod congregations, the elders have a responsibility for supervising or at least reviewing the theology of the pastor, his practice, how he preaches his sermon, not so much how, but the content of his sermons, his Bible classes, and his official duties. And in my congregation, I meet once a month with my elders, and they have an opportunity there. I mean, within a month's time, if they detect something that's wrong or that's a problem. Now, ideally, but I don't think it happens enough, the elders, after they're formed, they have a term of office. In our congregation, we have 2 years. So after they are formed, they should appoint one of their members to review synodical documents. I think that would be a great thing, because then it doesn't all rely just on the pastor. Not that the pastor can't do it, and I do it, but that way then, because there's supposed to be an accountability effect of the elders, so the pastor is accountable to them and through them to the congregation. But if they don't know what's going on, how can he be accountable to them? So I think the best thing would be to have elders appoint one of their members who likes to read, and every time there's a new CTCR document, the pastor reads a copy and the elder reads a copy. And then at the elders meeting, the pastor or the elder can give a summary of what's in there, how it might apply to the congregation, and then the other guy can say, yeah, that's perfect, or say, no, he didn't understand it at all, But then you got two opinions, and then maybe the elders say, we really got to study this one then. Most of the time it's not a problem. And I can say overall, CTCR does a great job. It's a blessing to our church body. There's a few that I think that, as I said, this one, there's some problems with that one. But overall, we're doing pretty good. The pastor, for sure, it should be in his list of things that he reads. Now, most of the documents, and I think most of the history of the CTCR are available in the convention workbook. So if you look, this is a current one. Let's see, where is it? I don't remember, but usually those are the things that I showed you where they're really, really small type. Here we go. Yeah, look at that. I think it was Ad Crucium that took these and blew them up so people could actually read them. You can do that on your computer, but to print it out, it's something else. So I just opened this up. This is page, 212, final report of the theological conversation between the churches associated with the International Lutheran Council. That's the ones we're in fellowship with. And the Roman Catholic Church. So, and it goes on for a couple of pages. I have not read that one, but there it is. This is a report of, or a response of the CTCR. So everything that the CTCR has published officially is in the convention workbooks. Now, ideally, your congregation would have a document library and have all the copies of the convention workbooks and the convention proceedings. Well, a lot of them don't, but the better ones do, the better congregations, and so then it's available to anybody that wants to look at them. I have, since I've been a pastor, I've collected all those. There may be some gaps. So my congregation has a question, I'll just pull mine out, make copies, and share it with the elders. But it's open, so you, and now with the internet, I think you can download all the convention workbooks back to the beginning of the CTCR, all the convention proceedings, and everything that they've ever published. It may be hard to find it, but it's there. So there's no excuse for saying, oh, well, we just don't have it in our congregational library. Now it's online for everybody. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
No.
that's the best I can do, first shot on it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, do you have any suggestions for the CTCR? Like, what might they do better, or something that they could look at?
Yeah, I think one idea I had, because you'd asked me this question before, I think, and they probably have done this, so I'm just second guessing because I've not served or really talked with them about this. I think there's some that could be, some of their documents that could be reviewed. In other words, I think there may be some problems with them. And the two that I am particularly concerned about are these two: inter-Christian relationships, and it has to do with church fellowship. But this is how we got into trouble. But those have been in the Missouri Synod since, when was it, 2000, 2011? Yankee Stadium. Do you remember the Twin Towers came down, and then they had a special worship service in Yankee Stadium. And it was supervised by Oprah Winfrey, I think. I don't think she was a priestess, but she was kind of the organizer. And one of our district presidents was one of the ministers that served there. And it turned, and a lot of us were upset about that, because what the district president did contradicted our official constitutional position about serving together with other clergy of other denominations when they're not in fellowship. Well, then after we complained about it, it turned out that the synodical president had approved it. Oh. And then he said, yeah, but I just followed this. And when we studied this, he said, well, Synod President did follow. There was like a loophole in here, and he said, oh, there's a loophole. We can do this. So whose fault was that Yankee Stadium? It was this document. So I think this one, it's overall pretty good, but I think it needs to be reviewed and get rid of the problems that are there. And the other one, and this one I think is more pressing, is 1 Corinthians 6, 1-11. An exegetical study, and you may think it's weird that Pastor Noland is, what can I say, defending attorneys and the whole business of law. But the reason is because this, when you read this, you get the impression of Christians can't go to court at all. But now wait a sec. Didn't the Missouri Synod just go to court with Concordia, Texas, to try to get our property back? Didn't we just, well, maybe a little bit ago, and this would be actions of the board of directors of Synod, because they deal with the legal and financial things. So if you don't like that the Missouri Synod is in a court case with Texas, that is the Concordia, Texas, blame the board of directors. If you think it's wrong, write them a letter. We also, there was some schools in Hong Kong and Shanghai. I don't know all the details, but, well, you know what happened to Hong Kong. It belongs to Communist China now, and they either closed down the schools or kicked out the missionaries, whatever, and said, well, we would like to have our property back, or at least the value of it, because there's communists that are teaching or using it now. And so some people complain, well, we should just let it go. Well, let me tell you, Hong Kong real estate is more expensive than anything else in the world. I mean, if we can get the real estate value, at least part of it back, we could pay for church workers for the next century. I mean, it is, the value of real estate in the Bay Area is ridiculous, but we're beat by Hong Kong. So if it's wrong for Christians to go to court, which is the idea you get from reading this, well, then we can't, the Synod should just give away everything. Every congregation should give anybody that makes a claim, just give it to them. And then no congregation has any place to live or to do its stuff. It's crazy. And why was this written? It was because it was a political thing, and I won't go into that. But it's definitely wrong. I mean, just throw this one away. But who's Martin Noland? There is also one, and this I think could be reviewed. The question is, did they really answer the questions? CTCR responses to expressions of dissent, 2004 to 2006. This was published in 2006. And the topics are participation in civic events. Well, that's the Yankee Stadium thing. Ecclesiastical supervision and dispute resolution, which has to do with the courts and the church. Service of women in congregational and synodical functions, and laymen performing the functions of the pastoral office. So whoever, and there's a process for doing. In the handbook, there's a whole section on dissent. If you disagree with what CTCR is, go to the handbook and follow that process. So whoever they were, they followed the process, and then the CTCR came up with this. This is their answer. But the real question is, did they really settle the issue? And I don't know. You know, after it's been 20 years since this came out. I doubt that the current CTCR has anybody from the previous commission. Maybe they could look at this again and say, did we really fairly deal with those issues? I think would make sense. There's a couple others that I can make comment on. A Lutheran stance toward contemporary biblical studies was done in 1966, when we still had faculty at St. Louis who believed in the historical critical method. So I think that one might need to be reviewed, and also because biblical studies has advanced, or they've changed, and they've got new ideas. I'm talking about the universities, not about our schools, but the general universities, like Santa Clara University. I think you know where that's located. That's a Jesuit school, and they like to be on top of everything. UC Berkeley, Stanford, they do have a religion faculty there. So if you talk to the religion faculty at Stanford and you showed them that, they said, this is 50 years old. Nobody, that's not contemporary anymore. So I think that one could be updated. And then there was one called A Project in Biblical Hermeneutics, and I can't find it on the website. That was 1969, just before the Semitic stuff happened. And so I think maybe they dropped that one. But they should do it officially. They should say, we've renounced that one and it's no longer considered official. Maybe they did that, but I couldn't find it. Finally, the most recent thing is, let's see, I think it's right here. This one just came out October 2025, and this is well needed. I'm glad they're working on it. Unity in Doctrine, what is it called? Doctrine, Uniformity, and Variety in Practice. It's really all about worship. And we have divisions in the Synod right now. Some congregations are doing things which I don't consider to be Lutheran worship. Well, maybe that's just Pastor Noland. But we need to have our best theologians on this. I like it, what they've done so far, but it doesn't deal with all the issues. I think it's just a start. So I commend them for the work, but let's keep working on it until we've pretty much covered everything, and then the Synod can sit down and say, well, what are we going to do with these congregations that don't want to worship like Lutherans? But you have to really lay out the problems and base it on Scripture and confessions, and then you can do it. So this is the type of thing that it's right up to date, and there's probably going to be stuff at the convention in resolutions that deal with that.
Makes sense. So there was one other that was very recent. It was a study. A study document on the appropriate use, godly use of technology. Right.
Oh.
That was a very recent one.
Oh yeah.
And I read through that one, and as a technology person, I understand what they're doing. And I see that there's another one. There's a resolution to do something similar for artificial intelligence, and so I guess my concern, I don't know, like it's that my concern is that it's not timely. Maybe is that my thinking. It's like, so like there's things addressing like social media use that probably should have come out 10 years ago and like had more guidance behind what how a pastor could work through with his congregation on how godly use of that. But it's like it seems like, and that's where I'm not sure where that they are the right body for certain things, and we're relying on them to do things that not necessarily where that there's needs to be something else entity to address those kind of things. I don't know. It just came to mind because I saw the use godly uses technology, and then I saw the artificial intelligence one, and I'm saying, I don't know if it's going to get what I'm as a layman hoping for.
Right. Yeah. So I had a comment on that. Now this one is Resolution 409 to address uses of artificial intelligence, short for AI for short, right? You're in that field, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least partially in that field. So my comment is it's a good resolution, but here's the problem. It doesn't define artificial intelligence. So how do the people at the convention, because they'll have to deal, how do they know what's actually being talked about? Or emerging technologies is not defined either. I mean, that's so vague. I mean, technology is emerging all the time. So, well, I'm a native of the Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and my observation is Missouri Synod is mostly Midwestern people, and they don't really understand a technology until it's been out for about 20 years. And I can give some examples, but I'd embarrass the people. So I wouldn't say that I've been an expert everywhere I've gone, but in the Missouri Synod, people come to me and say, what's going on with my computer? Or what's going on with the software? Or what should we... And I said, why don't you go to the guy at the university? Well, he's dealing with stuff that's 30 years old. Well, there's the problem my dad dealt with, So you've got technology that keeps changing, that it makes people nervous, for one thing. Those of us that have grown up with changing technology, it's just what happens. That's it's what we live and breathe. But I understand where there's a concern, but what I think needs to be done is they need to rewrite it, that resolution. You can correct me because you're an expert on this. I believe that any form of machine computation is AI. Am I correct?
You could count it as that. My son-in-law is a professor of computer science at Purdue Fort Wayne. His specialty is neuro-linguistic processing, which is a subset of machine learning, which everything like you said, machine learning is the wide umbrella that encompasses everything.
So an example is when I think of machine computation, it doesn't even need electronics. If you go to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, they have one of these old, what they are is like little discs that spin, and after it makes a full 360, it makes the next one move a little bit. It was a counting machine. I don't remember was that a Turing machine? I don't remember what they called that.
I don't remember what that one was called. Yeah,
but,
that one. Yeah,
but it was a way of saving a lot of time in hand calculation. But it's robotic, basically. You set it up. Here's your big number down here, and it helped with tabulation. My dad's company that he worked for, IBM, was originally something about tabulation. So they figured out how to use punch cards, and it saved a whole lot of time for things like voting or census, especially. That was a big one. And we look at it today and say, well, there's just a bunch of machines. Well, it's actually AI. It's artificial. It's doing the calculations that the humans used to do by hand or by their head. So here is my suggestion, is whether the resolution or the people that started, I think what they're really concerned about is what I term robotic speech, like Alexa, right? Or robotic text, like ChatGPT. And they have concerns about that because those people that don't know what they're dealing with can get they believe that they're dealing with a human. They can be fooled into that. Now, the reason I think that artificial intelligence is the term that's used, it's a marketing maneuver to sell computers and everything else. But what is it really? It's really a robot. So it's not really intelligent. It follows the algorithms or whatever been put into place. So you don't have to worry about, everybody watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and HAL took over, right? And took over the space mission and executed a bunch of human beings because he was afraid they were going to turn him off, right? I think that's kind of in the back of a lot of people's mind, that they're afraid, but they don't know the military already is using tons of computer stuff. I mean, once they were able to use computers for general purpose, they immediately military started using it. And it's for our advantage. I mean, how did those drones do what they're doing in Ukraine or Russia? There's computers behind them. I'm not going to go into all that stuff, but behind the computer is a human person that's either programming it or controlling it. So there's still accountability. So people that actually work with these things say, yeah, it's just a dumb robot. And this is kind of weird because, you know, we live in Silicon, maybe you don't have it down in Santa Clara Valley yet, but we have in San Francisco and San Mateo County, we have Waymo now.
Yeah, we just got it too. Yeah.
The robot taxis.
Mm-hmm.
And the original, they had some problems with it, you know, and they had to upgrade some of their eyes and some of their programming. But and I see the thing go by, and there's nobody driving us. There goes a robot. It's just a robot. It's not intelligent. It's just doing what it was programmed to do a long time ago. And the problem they're having with the Waymos is they get into a situation that the programmer didn't think about this. Like when the power went out in San Francisco, was that last year? About a third of San Francisco went dead.
Yep, I remember that.
And the Waymos, they got up to the street lights, and they didn't see red, yellow, or green. And then they went, duh. And then they sat there right in the junction, and nobody could get around them because the programmers hadn't thought about the possibility of the street lights going out because they didn't have power. Well, this happens all the time. Whose fault? It's not the robot's fault. It's the programmer's fault, right? And there's another case where the Waymo, there were like 6 or 7 of them crowded into a one-way street. Somebody must have called for a taxi, and 6 of them responded, and then they're all bunched up together. They don't know what to do. But they're a bunch of dumb robots. So don't worry about them. If you have a concern about them, you have to talk to the programmer or the operator. It's not the dumb robot that's the problem. That's my take. Now, you can give your own thing on this, but I think actually we're going to find that in terms of robotic speech and robotic text, there's tons of uses, and they're good things. I was just at the conference with Dr. Ben Mays, and he talked about how a book that he helped publish in Latin is now, they're using AI to help convert it, translation into English. And we've had English, other languages into English translation, but the results have been kind of clunky and full of error. Well, AI is making it a whole lot better. And when this is done, we'll have the original dogmatics text that Walther used in his seminary training. And it was too big of a project before AI came along. But now with a robotic text, you still need an editor to make sure it's correct. But all the grunt work, give the grunt work to the robots. That's my opinion. Now, I want your opinion on this.
So you
are an expert.
Along the same lines, there's a pastor somewhere that is that announced a project that he's translating all of Luther's table talks. Like
I've heard about that too. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. So
because only ports. It's one volume in Luther's works, and it's about that thick, and it's kind of the juicy stuff. but I mean, there's volumes in the Weimar, which is German and mostly German, I think, for the table talk. It's never been translated and never into English. And if you use AI, bang, it's there, and somebody just has to make sure it makes sense and is edited right. So yeah, I mean, I think there's wonderful things that are on the horizon. So proper use, as long as we have Brian Yamabe in charge, I'm fine with whatever you guys come up with.
So there are, my daughter at CUI is like, knows people who are using it, you know, in an inappropriate way. Like, you know, some will just like, I don't care about this class, so I'll just ask for the answer for the thing,
yeah.
and that. But the others have gone back and, you know, like they're using it as a companion or therapist, and so, you know, I don't. That's my like what I'm trying to understand, what the CTCR document is going to come back with. You know, like, is it going to try to address all those things? And then if they do or don't, how does we're still the members in the pew? How are we need someone to help somewhere at the churchly level, helping us, guide us through, you know, these things. The Pope came out with his document, but I think we need our own, you know, something, you know, that's maybe not a standing committee, but someone, you know, like someone who's looking at the contemporary stuff behind these, you know, behind the AI issues and things like that.
So here is the answer to what you just said. And that is, first, that the delegates elect Brian Yamabe to the Concordia University Board of Regents at Irvine. And then they also ask the CTCR to come up with a document that, in a reasonable Lutheran way, examines the problems with AI. And the CTCR sits down, they look around the table and says, well, who understands AI? And nobody raises their hand. And say, really? And then somebody raises their hand and says, I know a guy on the Board of Regents in Concordia University, he knows AI, and he also knows other Lutherans who understand AI. Why don't we appoint them to come up with something? So then the next day, the CTCR chairman calls you, Brian Yamabe, and says, oh, we got this problem with AI, and we don't know what to do with it. Can you be on a short-term committee that comes up with a statement about it and deals with all the various things that are present or that might be in the future? And by the way, it's committee, so do you have suggestions for other people? And Martin Noland has some suggestions for other people, too. I know a member of Lutheran Church of Our Savior, Cupertino, was at the beginning of AI work. We can mention, I can tell you if this comes to pass, but that's how the CTCR works. If they don't have the competence in their own board, because often they give it to a member of the board, and then they'll write, and then they'll give it to somebody else. And Missouri Synod, for all of it being percentage in the Midwest, we're all throughout the United States. Just look at the Lutheran Annual. Every major metropolitan area, we've got multiple congregations. We've got people of every stripe of vocation and expertise. We've got university professors. We've got engineers of all sorts. It's especially, I think one of our gifts is we have so many teachers in the elementary and at the high school. What do we have? Is it 500? Maybe it's not that many, but it's something like 500 high schools around the country. And if you don't have one nearby, you just kind of say, what is that? What does a Lutheran high school look like? But we got high school, secondary ed people, and they tend to be at a higher level. And plus we have our Concordias. We have 5 for sure. And those guys, we've always relied on our university professors for things like this. And if the university professor doesn't have time, he's got a graduate assistant that he can give that task to. And the grad assistant says, wow, I get to be at the cutting edge. And so we really, and it's not, if we were just a very small church body, let's say maybe 100 congregations, we couldn't do stuff like this. But we really are, and we're a highly educated group of people too. And even if they haven't gone beyond high school, we're illiterate people because we expect everybody to read the Bible. And they expected to listen to sermons and understand them. So all those things make us a pretty literate people, which is a good thing.
So my pitch, the last link in that chain is I know Pastor Weller introduced me to Dr. Scott Stiegmeyer. He's a professor at Fort Wayne. I mean at
Right.
CUI, and he does
CUI.
a lot of work on transhumanism and that kind of thing. And so he would be a perfect foil, person to have attached to it. So I have been thinking about all this. Everything you mentioned, I've thought about all this stuff. I mean, that's.
Do you have to clarify? Transhumanism is different than transgenderism.
Yes. Well,
correct?
it's actually of an accord. It's getting it's
explain.
like right because it's taking yourself, separating yourself from the body, and transgenderism is a aspect of transhumanism because you're getting you're bypassing the limitations of the body,
I never
and
thought
gender
about
is a limitation of the body. I mean, in their mind.
So one of the things I have a concern with, and it goes back to the 80s, and they made a computer game out of this, was there was a novel, and I don't remember the name of it. Maybe you remember it. It was science fiction, and it was about implanting chips in people's brains. Do you remember that?
I remember it. I don't remember the name, but yes.
And science fiction often ends up predicting what actually happens. So if you ever watch Star Trek, the original, they had this thing that looks like right?
Yeah.
The tricorder or whatever it was, right? And now we have them in our hands. We have
Well,
a
they had a
computer in
tricorder
there.
and a like a thing the communicator. So, but we don't even need two. We have one.
It's sort of funny, those of us that watch Star Trek, and we thought this would take the 25th century maybe, but now it's there. So yeah, it's whatever that was, that book, and I thought about it, and then more recently I read in Science Journal or something, maybe it was just online, but that they're able to make connections between electronic things and use, but it's for the benefit of people that have, for example, hearing or processing. It's not something to be afraid of, but there's fact they can put chips and wires and connect to your brain. Now is that transhumanism? I mean, because you're altering the ability of that one individual anyway, right? So is it good or bad? Ugly? Is it? Could the little chip in your brain take over? I don't know. As I get older, I could use some help. No, just kidding. But no, I think that's definitely an area of study, and that would be an area that the society at large, not just the church, would be concerned about. So we could help, make contributions that way. Often the church does. The church is often, because we think outside of the material box that we have in our own society. We look back 2,000 years to the time of Jesus, another 2,000 years to the time of Moses. We look to the future, to the second coming of Jesus, and the prophecies of Revelation, whatever they mean. So we're not just right in the box of our current decade or century. We do have some advantages that way. We share that with the Jews, by the way. I mean, Christians that study the Bible, they're what do you call it? They transcend their time and space. They really do. At least their ways of thinking about stuff. So yeah, we might be able to help contribute to proper use of things like that. So maybe you'll be on the commission or the committee. Yeah.
So I know it's final question. I know you're not stumping, but could the CTCR benefit from having a historian on the commission?
Not really.
No.
On occasion, yeah, but all they have to do is call, let's say, Fort Wayne Seminary. I think their expert in Reformation studies is Cam McKenzie Jr. And just give him a call, email him, and say, we got a question about this. And because that's part of the job of the faculty at our seminaries. And our theological faculty, too, like Scott Stiegmeyer. He's written a couple of books, I think. And so once he has published a book, he's considered an expert on what he wrote. And maybe he didn't address the particular question, but he's read the material on it, the related literature. And they look at the bibliography to Dr. Stigermeyer's book and say, nobody we know has read any of those books, but he has. So they'll give him a call or email and say, what did those books talk about? Does that relate to this issue? He said, yeah. Okay, we just appointed you to be on committee for this thing. That's kind of how it works. So they're not limited just to their own commission. They bring in all the experts they can to make sure that it's accurate and up to date. So yeah. So
all right.
Anyway, I didn't know that your daughter. She's what year at Irvine?
She finished her first year, so she's.
Well, congratulations. So, and I assume she's going back?
Oh, yeah. She loves it there. She is very
good.
happy being there. Yeah.
And you love the opportunity to go down and visit because then you can hang out in Laguna Beach, get a nice tan, and there's some nice... Anyway.
Yes, very much so. Well, Dr. Noland, thank you so much for being here and for all your wisdom.
Yes. And God's blessings, you're going as a delegate, right?
Yes, I
am.
am.
Our lay delegate for our circuit. So as you prepare, God be with you, and we can monitor. I think they will do it again. That you can see on your computer the sessions of the convention itself. Not all the other committee work and all that, but the actual convention floor. So maybe we'll hear you at the convention talking to some issue.
I hope not. I don't want to be at that microphone. I'll flub it. Those people are very thorough in anything they say. I'm like, oh.
But my father told me, because my dad's been a convention delegate a couple times, district many times, synod convention I think 2 or 3 times, and he said, Martin, when a layman gets up to the mic, everybody looks. Wait, he doesn't have a collar on, and he introduces himself. He's just a layman. But he starts speaking, and everybody listens. Now, the pastors are a dime a dozen, but a layman that can speak at the microphone and knows something about either A, the issue at hand, or its possible implications, they're influential. So don't discount that. That's part of the strength of the Missouri Synod. And without a doubt, in my mind, the layman is what saved the Missouri Synod from going the way of the ELCA. Because the laymen stood up, they got organized. There's a whole history on that. And they said, we're not going to tolerate what's going on at the St. Louis Seminary. Because, well, the seminary guys, or the upper mucky mucks and the church, the district presidents, they don't have anything on the laymen. The district presidents of the seminary, if they don't like you, they can make life miserable for a pastor. The layman can speak their mind and not be afraid of a thing. Right?
Right.
Strength of the Missouri Synod, lay parity with the pastors. It really is one of our strengths. And thank God for that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Noland. Have a good night.
Okay, have a good convention.